Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 6 of From Linear to Circular webinar series. And my name is Ilma, and as usual, I'm your co-host. And today we're going to speak about fashion. And as you may or may not know, fashion is the second most polluting industry according to the United Nations statistics, and it's also considered the largest creative industry here in the UK. And the CO2 emissions it produces is actually larger than the entire international flights and maritime shipping combined. So how would the circular vision look like for fashion is the question we're going to go deeper into today. And I'm joined by my colleague Harry, who will help us guide you through this webinar together with me. Welcome, Harry.
Thanks, Ilma. My name's Harry, and I'll be hosting alongside Ilma today, and really excited for this session.
So, Harry, what's your personal relationship with fashion? Is it something you're interested in?
Well, as you know, Ilma, I'm not a dedicated follower of fashion, but I believe you're going to show something quite embarrassing right now.
Indeed, I am. So this is from the summer school that me and Harry did last year together with a cohort of teenagers, and we had a chance to visit a sustainable fashion designer's studio in London. And I think, Harry, you could definitely be a model for our maybe Make Fashion Circular team and do some work together with them.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I got into it. I quite enjoyed it, really. Yeah, it was a great experience taking teenagers to Chris Rayburn's fashion studio in Shoreditch in London. And he's doing some really cool things, making high-end fashion items out of surplus military garments. So we tried on ex-Soviet Union jackets that turned into these high-end fashion items, and I believe a coat that had come from a MiG fighter, a MiG jet, however you say it, MiG fighter pilot's suit turned into a jacket. So some pretty cool stuff.
Amazing. And I can definitely say that all our young participants had a blast trying everything that they could their hands on in that shop. But today, before we go into our main topic on fashion, we need to cover a few things. And I'm also aware that there are quite a few new members to our community. So I think it will be quite useful to hear what I have to say. So the first thing is that everything related to the webinars, all the information, all the previous sessions, homework, amazing discussions, all that are happening on our Slack community. And you can see the link to the Slack community right now. And I was actually thinking that what might be most useful if I can show you how to navigate in the community. So this is the Slack window that you see when you join Slack on your laptop or desktop. And what I want to emphasize is that on the left side, you can see all the channels, and I recommend that you start with Get Info channel. And on this channel, if you go to the pin items right here, you can actually see the Slack guidelines. And when you open guidelines, you can see and find everything that you need to know about how to navigate and find your way around the Slack community. So it's a useful place to start, and if you have any questions, you can get them answered here. So that's the Slack community, and we also have our LinkedIn community that you can join and continue the discussions there as well. And as you know, these 2 weeks, so last week and this week, are special because we have 2 webinars for you. So this week we're starting with fashion today, and we'll continue with food on Friday, and then we'll go back to 1 webinar a week on Wednesdays as usual. And the last bit for me, just in terms of how to get most of this webinar today. So in Zoom, we encourage you to continue the discussions and share your comments in the chat box. Just when you put the comment in, make sure that you put it to all panelists and all attendees. And then if you have any questions in relation to the content, please ask it in the Q&A, and we'll try to bring them live to the webinar, as many as possible. And also thank you to all of you who asked us the questions on Slack, as we asked you if you have any questions coming into the webinar today, and we'll try to cover them throughout the webinar as well. And I think this is the time where we will introduce our guests. So Harry, on to you.
Thanks, Ilma. Right, so joining us today, we have 2 members from our Make Fashion Circular team called Matteo and Marilyn, who will be joining us to guide us through this discussion on fashion. So it's always interesting to find out a little bit about the guest speakers we've got on the webinars and how they ended up working for us in this space. So Marilyn, can we kick off with you? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, hi Harry, hi everyone. So I joined the foundation about 2 years ago, straight after coming from a consulting background. And the reason I made the move actually was because when I joined strategy consulting, I came from business school. And I think that before, when at the start of my career, and because of the education that I had had up to that point, I had this preconceived idea that in order to grow, companies either had to cut costs or produce and sell more. And out of complete chance, when I joined my first project at the strategy consulting firm, I had to assess about like over 100 of circular economy innovators, so startups. And what compelled me the most was like their plan to grow was not about producing or selling more, but rather using more, and in so doing, improving the environment and society. And that was it for me. So since then, I tried to make the move. And a couple of years later, I joined the MacArthur Foundation to work on circular economy. So I've been around for 2 years now.
Great, thanks Marilyn, that's awesome. Matteo, same for you. Could you tell us a little bit about your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, Harry, thank you so much. And yeah, I'm very excited to be here. So thank you for having us. Before joining the foundation, I was actually a student. I studied industrial engineering, and my Master of Science thesis was on pre-consumer waste in the fashion industry. So what we did was basically we went to all the main actors of the supply chain, asking them, trying to convince them to tell us about their inefficiencies. So we found out that actually textile waste is created at every step of the value chain. So we've got yarn waste, fabric waste, even finished garments waste. And we even saw that some of these actors, the most virtuous ones, were able to even create something out of that waste, something valuable, some other products. And while this really sounded like a really good thing, it didn't really shift the mindset from producing something out of waste to something that actually prevents waste from happening in the first place. So here I really saw the opportunity of a circular economy, because for the first time I understood that actually where I wanted to really work and try to make a difference was on the ways that you can really prevent waste from happening. And so I joined the Make Fashion Circular team, because I believe that we can really try to make that happen here.
Great, thanks Matteo.
And it's great to have you with us. And indeed, if you remember our 3 circular economy principles, and the very first one is designing out waste and pollution. And we want to move away from designing from waste and start designing out waste altogether. So just a reference there, and it's incredible to hear that you came upon this insight on your journey as well. But now that we move into the actual topic of fashion, I would like to launch a poll, and you can see that right in front of your screens right now. I don't think that we panelists can see that, but all the participants can. So you can see 3 questions in that. And the first question is, if in the last 15 years, clothing production has doubled while utilization has fallen by 40%, and you need to guess whether it's true or false. The second statement is about the fact that 1 truckload full of clothes gets landfilled every minute, and whether that is true or false. By the way, a lot of people think that it's true. And then the final one, it's whether 1/4 of all chemicals produced in the world is used in textiles. So right now, actually, the dominating answer to all 3 questions is that all these statements are true. So I'll be really curious to hear whether it's the case. And we have 70% of people who have voted. Why these questions, Marilyn and Matteo? Why these questions?
What?
Marilyn or Matteo? Yeah, you.
You want to take it, Marilyn?
No, go ahead.
These questions are a way to expose you guys to some stats that we came up with when we published the report, New Textiles Economy in 2017. And we are very pleased to see that you are replying in a way that really sounds good, because it feels like you know what are the real issues. The only thing I'd say is that the second one is actually false.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm sharing the results right now, so everyone should see it. So for the first question, 85% of people agree that it's true, and it's true, right? The first question, it's actually a true statement. Marilyn, you muted yourself.
Yeah, sorry, I thought I wasn't muting myself. Yeah, it is true, Ilma. That first one is correct.
And the second one, why is the second false?
Yeah, the second one is false because actually the actual number is even more shocking. So it's 1 truckload full of clothes gets landfilled or incinerated every second. Yeah, so that if you do the maths by the end of this webinar, I mean, it's insane. It's like 60 truckloads per minute, actually.
That's incredible. For some reason, well, obviously I knew that it was false, but I thought that it's less than that. I didn't register that it's actually 1 per second. That's incredibly wasteful. And the final statement, so is it indeed that the 1/4 of all chemicals produced in the world is used in the textiles?
Yeah, it's true, Ilma. It's also quite impressive, because we always tend to think about the fashion industry made out of cotton, out of what makes the fiber, but we never think about what's on top of the fiber, that is chemicals. And that's really harmful, not only for us when we get in touch with it, but also and especially for the environment when we use those chemicals in the production.
Right. So this all refers to the current system of fashion and the wastefulness and pollution effects that it currently has. So is there more that you could share with us about how that system currently works and what the key challenges are?
Yes, I will share my screen right now to show you the current materials, the current textile flow of the industry. Okay.
Great, we can see that.
Perfect. So yeah, this research was done in 2017 as part of our new textiles economy report, which is publicly available, and I think everyone should have access to that in case you want to know more. But what I'm going to walk you through is the current textiles flow of the fashion industry. So if we start from the left, I think we can see that pretty much 100% of all the clothes are made from virgin feedstock. And what that means, it means like these are raw materials that are extracted and then used to make clothes. And then when producing clothes, about 12% gets lost in production, and that's as cut-offs in the manufacturing floor. Then clothes get used, and we've seen in the poll, and we revisited in the poll, over the last 15 years, clothing production has doubled, but the clothing utilization has fallen by 40%. So, which means that people are using their clothes less and less compared to before.
So in other words, they buy many more, but actually instead of using it, let's say 10 or 20 times, they use it like 2 or 3 times and throw it away.
Yeah, well, it's fallen like 40%, so it will probably be more like 12 times instead of 20. Okay. But yeah, it's still quite significant given the amount of clothes that are being made. Then about 14% of all the clothes get cascaded into recycling. But what is shocking here, and most I guess impressive, is that only 1% goes back into textiles, meaning that is closed loop recycling. So textile to textile recycling is only 1%. So if you, I mean, it's like only 1% of all the clothes that are being recycled go back into clothes. That's in a sense what it means.
Marilyn, what does cascaded recycling mean?
So it means that it goes to, you see some wipes there. So people use it as insulators or wipes to, like to wipe the house, mops and things like that, or insulating material that you can put below the carpet or below the cars, the carpet of the cars. I guess that the big question there is that really the most valuable use of this textile material that has been barely worn in the first place. So that's what it means. And then that's
downcycling. So that's basically downcycling.
Exactly. And about 73% gets landfill or incinerated, and as we have seen in like Lehman way of speaking, that translates to 1 second of truckload. Sorry, 1 truckload every second that gets thrown like as we speak.
Can I ask a question about the 12% that gets lost in production? Because that was one of the questions that we received from the Slack before the webinar. So who's responsible for that? Is it the companies that manufacture? Is it the companies or like design houses that order the manufacturing and make these orders? Where does the liability currently lies?
So that's a great question, and I think there's no straightforward answer because everyone has, I guess, everyone has accountability into how clothes are made right now. So we cannot blame it on the designer, and neither on the company, and neither on the manufacturer that's actually doing it. I think the whole system needs to be rethought so that in such a way that whenever we actually make clothes, they are made only like to meet demand. And in such a way that whenever it's produced, there's no loss with it, like in the process. And right now, I mean, the reason that it's 12%, and that's quite a high number, it's because of the like economies of scale, like the amount of clothes that get made. It's all based on how the industry is growing, is based on economies of scale. So the current manufacturing practices fit that model, and not one that is meant to be, used more or just meet demand. So that's one of our. Can I switch to our vision statements?
Yes, please. So tell us how that would look like in circular economy.
Yeah, so for us, we've got this vision of a circular economy. So in a circular economy for fashion, clothes are used more, they're made to be made again, and from safe and renewable materials. And we have been defining as Make Fashion Circular the actual, I guess, details of what that means in practice. And Matteo can talk more about that because he's been quite heavily involved. But in a sense, in a circular fashion industry is based on the 3 principles of the circular economy. So we will make the most of the materials and products used. So that's like increasing the number of wearers of clothes. Everything that is made can be put into the system again, so that it's made again. So clothes can be put into clothes. And everything that is made out of safe and renewable materials in a way that enhances society and the environment. That's in a very high level the vision for a circular fashion industry.
Mm-hmm. If we were to compare it to our 3 circular economy principles that we talk about, so the first one, designing out waste and pollution, would refer to making to be made again so that it can be turned into something else rather than becoming waste. And then the second principle, keeping products and materials in use, it's about clothes being utilized and being used more. And then regenerating natural systems, it's about ensuring that clothes are made from safe and renewable materials, and that I guess it also implies that the practices used to grow, let's say, these renewable materials such as cotton are regenerative. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes, Ilma, that's exactly what it means. And from safe and renewable materials, what is important to note, just as in the circular economy principle, it's that everything that is extracted from the environment, you do it in such a way that it has a positive impact from where you're getting it. So let's say if you source regenerative cotton grown from regenerative practices, then that means that the agricultural methods that the cotton has been grown are actually improving the soil from where this cotton is coming, instead of like depleting it, so that no more cotton coming around. So that's like a key difference from moving towards a regenerative economy as opposed to an extractive one, which is the one that we're currently having. Matteo, I don't know if you want to add anything else on this.
Well, this is good, and we will speak about that a bit more later to further detail out how can these actually apply to different materials.
So maybe
can I ask a slightly challenging question here that some of our viewers might be thinking? And just looking at this, and I've seen, you know, the phrase fast fashion crop up in the chat. Reading this seems to be a complete contradiction of, kind of goes against the grain of what we see around fast fashion. And what's your take on how that sits with this vision?
Yeah, that's well, it's a tricky question. I mean, I guess that starting from the fact that what we know as fast fashion doesn't really translate with what that term started meaning. So I'll explain that. So fast fashion referred to moving from a model that was taking, I don't know, 3 months to go from design to the shop towards one that goes every 3 weeks. Or every 2-3 weeks, and that was pioneered by, you know, one of the some of the biggest well-known fast fashion firms, and then that term proliferated. But now, actually, you could argue that every single company or like retailer out there is fast fashion, because there's even the luxury brands don't take longer than a month to bring something from design to the shop. Because that's the model that the whole industry is living. So how does our vision sit against fast fashion? It's that, yeah, it's like we need to move the whole industry from a model that is growing on selling and producing more towards one that is using more, regardless of the price point, which I guess that some of the viewers are referring to. Because right now I think people think, oh, fast fashion is like, you know, like anything that you buy for like a t-shirt of like £5, whereas actually like something that is way over like £100 might also be made in like a fast fashion producing way. So it's very tricky to like.
We could have fast circular fashion. That could be a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one or the other. It's just like how do you design the system so that you know, like if you're using your clothes more, regardless if you've paid £20 or £100, if that garment has been designed for you to wear it for longer, then, you know, that fits within what our vision of a circular economy. If you are actually getting those wears out, not because there's also a difference between the garment being able to withstand like the, you know, longevity of the actual garment, and how many times are people actually wearing it. So
a question that we received quite a few times is regarding safe and renewable materials. Could you elaborate a little bit more in terms of what it is that we actually mean when we say safe and renewable?
That's a very good question, Ilma, because we actually mean many different things with that principle, and we don't mean just one thing. First of all, the main thing is what Marilyn said. So we want to make sure that the materials we take from the earth are not taken without thinking about the fact that we deplete the earth while doing that, but we need to try to do that in a regenerative way. And what's possible today? That's also another good question, because regenerative agriculture today is not very widely available. And the closest we can get to that today, but in a large scale, the closest we can get is organic agriculture. So if you want an example of what that could mean, then you can think about organic, but actually regenerative. So what we want in our vision is something that goes even further, because organic is based on not using fertilizers, not using pesticides, but it's still not regenerating. It's more sustaining how the the land is currently. So this is one element.
Mhm.
The other element is about making sure that the production of clothing is not made with chemicals that are harmful to the environment. So we put together these two things in the third principles. This second one is now mainly led by what you might know as ZDHC, the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals, which is an initiative that took place starting from back in, I guess, 2015, when Greenpeace came out with the detox campaign. They were the first ones to really shout out how polluting this part of the fashion industry was. So this is the other half of that third principles we have, Ilma.
Great, thank you. And I'm sure that it has been a very useful answer just to understand better what we mean with these two words. And another question, which is probably also quite a challenging one before we move to examples. So we received quite a few people asking about the social dimension of the fashion industry. And I would like you both just to talk a little bit more if the social dimension is covered in any way within this vision or not. And by social dimension, I mean the working conditions for laborers in the factories, the child labor in some countries, pay issues, safety issues, things like that.
That's a great point. And actually, we recently, as I said at the beginning, we've been refining our vision, and we implicitly included the societal aspect under that, from safer and renewable materials, because that comes out of the principle of regenerated natural and social ecosystems or systems. So it is implicitly included there, but then we got the same feedback that unless you read the details below that, you just don't get that from this vision. So now our current vision says that from safer renewable materials in such a way that enhances the environment and society. And that encompasses all of the social aspect. And if you want to have an idea of how it will be done, it's obviously, you know, like fair practices and like good working conditions, but also about is that change, once you change the operating model of the industry from one that is linear, so like extractive, let's say, the flow that I showed, towards one that uses more, there's also a change in the in how value gets distributed and how the supply chain will change. So it will become, for example, more localized. I mean, that's like a good potential. And in so doing, it will enhance different local communities and upskilling them and just improve their context in a better way.
That mean, Marilyn, more localized production?
Yeah, that's one of the possibilities.
Cool, thanks.
So let's talk more practically about what this vision would mean. And could you share with us some examples? Maybe starting with the first one, made to be used more?
Yes, so let me just share my screen again.
Yeah.
Oops. Can you see it?
Yes, thread up.
Great, yeah, we've got, so I will explain a bit the concept that ThreadUp is leading, and I guess it falls within our vision of increasing use, or closer use more. And ThreadUp is a managed marketplace, and what that means is like you send your clothes to ThreadUp for free, they sort it, they put them on sale for you, they sell them for you, and then you get between 25 to 80% of the value in which clothes of what you sold the clothes, basically. So it makes it extremely easy for us as users to resell our clothes. It also creates an incentive for us to buy clothes that you know have higher quality, so that they can be worn more and more by even other people. And it creates this incentive because you know that if you invest on a piece, then you're going to get more money for it afterwards, and in an easy way. So that's what they're working. And what is interesting as well is that they're based in the US, and last year they launched a resale as a service kind of like platform or offering, I guess, for that they offer now to different retailers. And they've got partnerships with different brands to either appear as a pop-up store inside their retail shops. So what they do is, like, let's say if I'm, I don't know, brand X, and ThreadUp will sort all of the items belonging to your brand and send them to you, so that you can have as a resale or vintage section in your store physically, that people can just dive in and then buy stuff from like the 60s or 90s or whatever. And so they can do that, or also loyalty programs, meaning that if you send something belonging to whatever brand, then you get a voucher that you can spend on the same platform. Yeah, so they've got these offerings now, which are making it easy for brands that don't have, I guess, the reverse logistics capabilities to offer resale. They make it easy so that they can still offer resale items without having to have all these, like back office logistical setup. And yeah, they're great.
Marilyn, I can see some people talking about it in the chat window. What about this notion that it's not fashionable to have the secondhand item? And also in some cultures, it might be more acceptable than others. How do brands fight that? How do they make reuse fashionable?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest, I guess, challenges for vintage clothes and secondhand clothes. Some brands are trying to rebrand the name secondhand to pre-loved or pre-worn to overcome this issue and get people to buy it. It has definitely picked up way more in the West, so in the US and Europe, as opposed to China. However, it's picking up now in the cities recently. What is great and how brands overcome it is that more often than not, vintage items or secondhand items are sold at a lower price point. And that's something that users value a lot. So it gives brands access to a whole different customer base just by lowering the price point. Another thing is uniqueness. What you find, salvage or in secondhand can be seen or is seen or considered quite unique by lots of people right now, because you cannot find it on like a normal store. So those are the things that brands are doing in order to rebrand or promote the, secondhand and resale.
Great, and thank you for that answer. And also, I just launched another poll, and I'm going to share the results. And we asked you whether you agree with the statement that selling more garments is the only way for a company to make loads of profits. And the vast majority of you said that no, you do not agree. And this is exactly what we've been talking about, the new ways of making a profit or new business models. And you have yet another example to share, right, Marilyn?
Yes, I'll share another way of increasing use, which is quite well known right now, and that's Rent the Runway. So Rent the Runway it started off, I think, in 2009, so about 10 years ago now. And they started off as offering occasion wear only, so that's a dress that you will wear for a wedding, for example. And then they grew massively, so much so that now they're considered one of the fashion unicorns. So they're valued at over 1 billion. But not only their offering grew, like they they moved from just occasion wear to also offering everyday clothes into their unlimited service, which is a subscription-based service where you pay $69 per month and you get access to 4 different items that you can have on rotate all the time. So whenever you get bored of some of them, you send them back and you can choose whatever you send back. So if you have 4 and then you got bored of 2 of them, you send back 2 and then you can choose 2 other ones and they get sent to your house. And they have different plans now. So it starts from 69, but I think you can pay more and get more items. And it's a great solution for people that, you know, like you've got events often, or just like your everyday, you know, meetings at work that you need to have a certain type of work, but you don't want to use. Also, if people live in the city, like New York or London, for example, where the wardrobes have been, like the actual physical wardrobes in the rooms are quite small now, so people have less space to you know, like store clothes. Then it just provides like a great solution. Another one is like in the US, because it's a US company, so they can send you the whatever you're renting wherever you are in the US, and you can send it back from wherever you are. So let's say that you've got a wedding somewhere else that is not your home, they will send your stuff there, so you don't have to pack anything, and then you can send it back from there, so you don't have to pack anything. So it provides like a great solution for events like that. Obviously, once we start having events again, but in the, I guess, like in the normal time, it provides a good solution for that.
So I'm just looking at some of the comments, and one that I really liked was about the clothing libraries in Swedish cities, which I've never heard before, but Lena says that it's not a very big phenomenon yet it's growing. There was another comment also just saying that it's greenwashing. So it would be interesting to continue that discussion, perhaps not here, but we can always pick it up in the Slack channel afterwards. So let's move on to the other examples illustrating the point made to be made again. And so how about you start talking, Matteo, and I'll launch another poll in the meanwhile.
Yeah, that's great, Ilma. So what you can see here is an example from a company that you might know. It's pretty famous, called MacArthur. And they made this collection of jackets called Infinity. So the purpose of that collection of jackets is that they are made to be made again after they can no longer be used. But the question is, how were they able to make sure that jackets were made to be made again? Well, the answer for MacArthur was that they simply had to make the jacket all out of one single material. And that material that they chose was nylon 6, not nylon, not general nylon, nylon 6, a specific type of nylon. And this was a challenge for them, because usually jackets are made out of several different materials. Think about all the components of a jacket. It's not just the main fabric, but it's got also the linings, the zipper, the padding. Well, they managed to find a solution for every and each one of these components to be made out of nylon 6. This is really helpful because it enables the jacket to be taken as it is by one single recycler. And in particular, MacArthur made a partnership with a very well now very big recycler in Europe called Aquafil, so that after use, the jackets can be sent directly to that recycler. The recycler doesn't have to worry about disassembling the jacket. They just need to put the jacket into their recycling machines, and they can have new yarn coming out, which can be used for the next jacket.
So this enables us to do the closed loop recycling, right? So we keep the materials on the same level and we can create products of the same quality and value.
Absolutely, Ilma. That's in particular what we call here is chemical recycling. because the way Aquafil recycles jackets is done in a chemical way. So they dissolve the plastic material back into the constituents, like the main basic components of plastics. And in this way, they're able to get to the same quality we have at the beginning. So we can potentially do the cycle an infinite number of times. That's why they decided to call it infinity. And what's great is that you not only have now the winter jacket, but they recently released a whole collection of jackets that includes more colors and also a windbreaker. So that really tells how many opportunities there are.
And Matteo, are there any harmful impacts associated with the chemical recycling?
Well, that's another great question. Chemical recycling is for sure more energy intensive than mechanical recycling. That's for sure. In fact, by no means I mean to say that chemical recycling is the only type of recycling. There are several types of recycling that can be chosen according to the way the product is designed and what you actually want to get. If you can allow yourself to have a material that is slightly less of a higher quality than before, you can also go for mechanical recycling, get a slight advantage in terms of energy consumption, and maybe that's going to be the case. But there are actually life cycle assessment studies that are starting to measure actually the impact of chemical recycling, and it is quite reasonable to say now that it is much less actually intensive than producing from virgin.
So I'm just going to share the results now from the poll, and we asked if a garment made of one single material is more likely to be recyclable, and 94% of our participants agreed with that statement. And I guess that is correct.
That's correct. Yeah, it's absolutely correct. And just to add something to that, it is more likely to be recyclable. It is not the only way for it to be recyclable, because we've got also another way that we can actually recycle a garment is by enabling easy disassembly of the components, so that each component can be addressed to a separate stream of recycling.
Okay, and you have another example for us as well.
Yeah, yes, I do. This one is about Adidas, and it's about a shoe. And it's a very similar example because they actually tried to face the same challenge Napapiri had, which was to make all the components out of one single material. The difference was that for a shoe, maybe that was even more challenging, because usually a shoe is made of about 15 different materials. So it was very challenging for them, but it was also part of a creative process that really led them to something very interesting. They made everything out of TPU, which is a type of polyurethane that can, similarly to the Infinity jacket from Napapiri, can be recycled as it is without the need to disassemble it.
So let's move on to the next category and the last item on the vision, made of safe and renewable materials. What kind of examples do you have? Yes, I can see the first one. Tencel, tell us more about it.
Yeah, so for the safe and renewable materials part of the vision, we decided to show you this example from Lenzing. Lenzing is a company that produces fibers. And the fibers Lenzing produces are made from wood. Not everybody knows that actually 6% of the clothing, of the textile materials, are made out of wood. And this raises, I'd say, two main concerns. The first concern is that wood needs to be taken in a way that doesn't deplete the forests, of course. So actually Lenzing has certifications that actually ensure that actually trees are cut at a rate that is equal or lower than the rate of regeneration of the trees. This is the first big and important thing. The second one which is the one maybe why 10-cell specific product Lenzing is doing is very famous now. It's because they are able to process the wood. So to obtain the fiber, they're able to process the wood by only using chemicals that they can keep in a closed loop. So they actually don't have any discharge of hazardous chemicals and solvents in the production of 10-cell fiber. And this is very important because usually fibers made out of wood have a really high impact in terms of chemicals that are then discharged into the environment during the production.
So the question that we asked in our final poll today was whether a garment made of natural organic fibers is automatically safe and healthy. And actually here we had a bit more of a split, although still overwhelmingly 80% of people disagreed with that, probably referencing to what you were saying earlier about organic cotton, but 20% still believe that it's true. So could you tell us more which one is the case?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it is false. It's not automatically safe and healthy, but I understand why there are a bit more instances of true, because it's a bit less immediate. As I told you at the very beginning, we tend not to think about the chemical side of the production of clothing. So once we find a good material that is grown in an organic or even maybe a regenerative way, then we really need to make sure that what we do after to that material doesn't really make it harmful for us and for the environment. So if we only think about the source of the material, we really don't see the full picture, we don't see the full system. And to make sure that it is safe and healthy, we need to take into account all the steps of the production process.
And
Right.
the second, yeah, Harry, you have a question?
No, no, you go for it, Elma.
I just wanted to move to the next example. So unless you have something to say before that. No, so tell us about the second example. I guess it will be about dyeing process.
Yeah, Archroma is a company that produces mainly dyes. So a bit related to what we just said. When companies decide how to dye and to process, to finish their garments, they need to choose products coming from companies that actually care about this aspect. And Archroma is one of those, because actually they comply with the best standards that are in place, such as ZDHC, Blue Sign, OEcotex, and others. Plus, they have a very particular thing. They are trying to innovate in a way that chemicals are made out of organic matter, not by synthetically produced matter, but from organic matter. This really makes us a bit less dependent on synthetic chemistry, and we can even start to think about how to take the materials for the dyes in a regenerative way, in a way that enhances the environment rather than depleting it.
Thanks a lot, Matteo. So I believe that the Make Fashion Circular team have been really busy over the last few years, and you've been involved in some really interesting projects. Could you tell us a little bit more about what we've been up to at the Make Fashion Circular team?
Sure, Harry. Yes, so in 2019, the team has been working on two main projects that I'd like to talk to you about. The first one is what we call what was called #WearNext, and this project was aimed at really addressing the customers and trying to spread to make customers understand that in order to tackle the problem of waste in the fashion industry, there is something that they can do. There is something in their realms, and that thing is to really know that their clothing is not rubbish. And once a person is done with the use of some piece of garment, what they can do is actually return it to some collection point. And from those collection points, we can enable a technical cycle for garments that can either address to reuse, to remanufacturing, or to recycling. this is why we started this communication campaign that was running in the city of New York, and that was led by us together with a set of brands, the city of New York itself, and collectors and manufacturers. So in this way, basically you could see posters all around the city of New York, as well as on social media, with a link. Actually, there was a QR code addressing people to a map of all the collection centers in the city of New York. So it was about 1,100 collection points. So this was actually lasting 3 months, and we've been really happy to see that the collection volumes during those 3 months compared to the previous year had increased by 600 tons of clothing.
Wow.
I guess this is one of the rare examples when we have engaged in the campaign that relates to individuals or consumers, because most often we talk about systemic change and the fact that as individuals, we can make choices, but these choices are limited by the system that we operate in. And therefore we need to change the system itself rather than trying to affect consumers and their behaviors. And there were some questions coming from the Slack in terms of how we can educate consumers. And I think this is one of the great examples. And also just wanted to make a reference to the webinar last week on the cities. And this is one of the examples of how we have engaged cities and the policymakers and try to make a campaign to encourage consumers to behave differently in that particular city, which in this case in New York.
Have other cities who've been looking at this taken an interest, and is it spreading? Is this idea spreading?
Actually, we are not running any of these initiatives by ourselves, as led by EMF, because as Ilma said, our main focus is to try to change the system. So we encouraged other cities to take on similar initiatives, and we really look forward to seeing more of these out there.
Right.
So that's one of the initiatives that you've been working on, and you have the second one to share with us. Is that right?
Yes, Ilma. So same year, 2019, we also were very happy and excited to launch another initiative called the Jeans Redesign. So the Jeans Redesign is actually a set of guidelines. So there is the boring part of it, which is just a set of guidelines on how we can actually redesign jeans, so we can produce some jeans that are fit for the system that Marilyn laid out at the beginning of the webinar. So jeans that are made to be made again, that are made from safe renewable materials, and that are also able to be used more. The way we did it was we actually detailed the guidelines into 4 main points, and these 4 main points are durability. So all jeans should be at least able to withstand 30 home laundries and still being able to retain their standards in terms of testing and quality. Secondly, they need to be recyclable. And to be recyclable, after speaking to more than 40 recyclers and other experts in the industry, we really figured out that the only way for them to be recyclable was to make them out of as much cellulosic content as possible. And that meant that we set a threshold. So 98% of the jeans by weight had to be done made out of cellulosic content. That could have been cotton, could have been man-made cellulosic fibers. Also rivets, the classical metal parts of jeans had to be removed to a minimum as per the guidelines. And yeah, Marilyn?
Yeah. That's great, Matteo. And I think that what people might be wondering is, you know, like what after the technical guidelines? And I think it's worth mentioning as well that we know that providing technical guidelines address the, I guess, technicalities and the people that work with that product creation specifically. and the manufacturers, for example. But fashion being such a creative industry, we put ourselves a challenge about, okay, but how do we make this inspiring so that the creatives of the industry and the designers can actually pick it up and embed circular economy principles in their everyday life. So we are working on that very thing as we speak, because we think that the designers and creatives as a whole, so it's not just the product designer, but also the buyers, the merchandisers, the marketing teams are key in order to transition the system from linear to circular.
Great, thanks Marilyn and Matteo. Can I just ask one quick question? Why jeans specifically? Why go for that garment?
Well, the reason why we chose jeans, Harry, was because jeans are such an ubiquitous product. Everybody wears jeans, and everybody has a pair, at least one. So we decided to simply start from that because we thought it could have simplified the problem. Of course, our aim is to change the whole industry and all the way all garments are made. That's why, other than these jeans redesign initiatives that now encompasses, now it's been signed by 50 brands that's actually committed to producing more than 600,000 jeans according to the guidelines by May next year. Apart from that, now we are also trying to move forward and extend those sort of guidelines to all clothing.
So lots of the insights and the learnings from the jeans redesign are transferable to other areas.
Yes, absolutely, Harry. Yeah.
Cool.
So we have covered a lot of ground in this webinar. We looked at the current fashion system, and then we spoke about the circular vision for fashion, and we covered some examples for each of the vision areas. How to make fashion that can be used more, how to make it that it's made again and that it's made out of renewable and safe inputs. And we talked about 2 initiatives that we have implemented here at EMF with the Make Fashion Circular team. So my general question to close this webinar today is, so going forward, and I'm sure that there are still a lot of projects that you're working on right now that we won't be able to touch upon in this webinar, but what do you see as the biggest challenge for the fashion industry transitioning to circular economy?
Yeah, great question, Ilma. I think there are several from different at different stages of the value chain. There are different challenges. So since clothes are made, I guess that a big challenge is that not everyone is well informed about the actual, I guess, like how the composition of the textiles impact the recyclability or the end of use of the garment. So people don't have that vision. When you see it more, there are loads of challenges about how to get, as we touched some of them already, how to get customers to us to like get more wears out of the clothing. To increase the 14% of clothes being collected, and that refers back to the pilot that we did in New York. There are a lot of logistical challenges to just get to increase the amount being collected in the first place. And it is challenging because every city or every state in the case of the US has a different way of recycling. And here in England, every county has a different process and method of recycling. So even increasing that number in the first place is hard. Then a couple of other challenges that we've identified when doing the jeans design, for example, is that there's a massive innovation gap in terms of the potential to recycle blends. So our jeans redesign guidelines state quite clearly that it needs to be made of at least 98% cellulosic fibers, which means that you can only have something that isn't cellulosic of up to 2%. So all of the skinny jeans and that are high in stretch are completely out of that, because you cannot recycle that. And that's like one of the biggest innovation gaps that we've seen. So yeah, depending on at each step of value chain, I guess there's like a different challenge that we need to address.
So there are still a lot of challenges that we need to address, and we're looking into here at EMF, and also we need the entire system to be more aware and start facing them. So thank you so much for our great guest speakers. Thank you, Marilyn, and thank you, Matteo. Thank you, Harry, for being a co-host with me in this webinar today. And just the final couple of things for all of you to know. So first is that the next webinar is on Friday at 4 p.m. GMT+1, and Seb and Monica will be guiding you through the topic of food and how circular economy looks in the food area. And we will pick up with the next webinar next week on Circulytics, our circular economy measuring program. And the homework for this week will be the same as last week, which is to get together into your learning trios, but we will put all the instructions for that in the Slack. So thank you so much everyone for tuning in today, and we will continue chatting to you on Slack. Thank you everyone, and goodbye.